Jesus' most important teaching, the revolutionary message of love. What if I told you that nearly 2,000 years ago, a carpenter from a small town in Galilee spoke words that would fundamentally change how humanity understands love, compassion, and our relationship with one another? What if I told you that this teaching was so radical, so revolutionary, that it challenged every social norm of its time and continues to challenge us today? Today, we're diving deep into what many scholars, theologians, and followers consider to be Jesus' most important teaching. Not just important for Christians, but important for anyone seeking to understand how to live a meaningful, connected life in our complex world. We'll explore not just what Jesus taught, but why it was so revolutionary, how it transformed lives then, and how it continues to offer profound wisdom for our modern challenges. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or simply curious about one of history's most influential figures, this message has something profound to offer. So what was this teaching that has echoed through centuries? Let's begin our journey. To truly understand the power of Jesus' teaching, we need to step back into the world of first-century Palestine. Picture a society rigidly divided by social classes, ethnic boundaries, and religious purity laws. Jews and Gentiles lived in separate worlds. The rich and poor existed in completely different realities. Men and women had vastly different rights and roles. Religious leaders created elaborate systems of rules that often excluded the very people who needed hope most. This was a world where your birth determined your destiny, where touching the wrong person could make you ritually unclean, where showing kindness to your enemies was seen as weakness, and where love was often transactional. You love those who love you back, you help those who can help you in return. Into this divided hierarchical world stepped a rabbi who would turn everything upside down. Jesus of Nazareth didn't come with political power or military might. He came with words that would prove more powerful than any sword, more revolutionary than any political movement. And at the heart of his message was a teaching so simple a child could understand it, yet so profound that we're still unpacking its implications today. It's found in what many consider the greatest commandment, but Jesus presented it in a way that completely redefined what love actually means. The moment came when a religious expert, trying to test Jesus, asked him a question that cut to the heart of everything. "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus' response was revolutionary not because the individual components were entirely new, but because of how he connected them and what he meant by them. He said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." Now, you might think, that doesn't sound so revolutionary. Love God, love others, isn't that pretty basic? But here's where it gets fascinating. Jesus wasn't just giving a nice moral platitude. He was fundamentally redefining the very nature of what love means and who deserves it. First, notice how Jesus connects loving God with loving others. He doesn't separate spiritual love from human love. They're inseparable. You can't truly love God while hating your fellow human beings. Your relationship with the divine is directly connected to your relationships with others. But here's the truly radical part. When Jesus says, "Love your neighbor," he completely explodes the traditional definition of who your neighbor is. In the Jewish context of his time, your neighbor was typically understood to be your fellow Jew, particularly those in your community. But Jesus had something much more expansive and challenging in mind. To illustrate just how revolutionary this teaching was, Jesus told one of his most famous stories, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Picture this scene: a legal expert, still trying to justify himself, asks Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Instead of giving a simple answer, Jesus tells a story that would have shocked his audience. A man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he's attacked by robbers, beaten, and left for dead. 3 people come down that road. First, a priest, someone you'd expect to help, a religious leader. But he sees the wounded man and crosses to the other side of the road. Then comes a Levite, another religious figure. He also avoids the wounded man. Finally, a Samaritan comes along. Now here's what makes this story so radical. Samaritans and Jews despised each other. They had centuries of ethnic and religious hatred between them. To Jesus' Jewish audience, Samaritans were heretics, half-breeds, enemies of the faith. But it's this Samaritan who stops, tends to the wounded man's injuries with his own oil and wine, puts him on his own donkey, takes him to an inn, pays for his care, and promises to cover any additional expenses. Then Jesus asks the devastating question, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The legal expert can't even bring himself to say, the Samaritan. He just says, the one who had mercy on him. With this one story, Jesus completely revolutionized the concept of neighbor. Your neighbor isn't just the person who lives next to you, or someone who shares your ethnicity, religion, or social class. Your neighbor is anyone who needs your help, even if they're your supposed enemy. But Jesus didn't stop there. He pushed this teaching even further with words that still challenge us today. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Think about how radical this was. In a world where revenge was considered justice, where an eye for an eye was the standard, Jesus was saying, love the people who hurt you. Pray for those who make your life difficult. Show kindness to those who show you cruelty. This wasn't naive idealism. Jesus understood the reality of evil, hatred, and injustice. But he was proposing a completely different way of responding to these realities. Instead of perpetuating cycles of hatred and revenge, love has the power to break those cycles. When someone treats you badly, the natural human response is to treat them badly in return. But Jesus was saying that this natural response, while understandable, doesn't actually solve anything. It just creates more pain, more division, more hatred. Love, on the other hand, not naive love that ignores wrongdoing, but strong love that refuses to be conquered by hatred, has the power to transform situations and even transform hearts. This is why Jesus could say, as he was being crucified, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. He wasn't just teaching a philosophy, he was living it out in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Jesus' teaching on love is how it starts from the inside out. Notice that when Jesus gave the great commandment, he said to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This isn't just about actions, it's about the complete transformation of who you are at your core. Jesus understood that real love isn't just a feeling or even just an action, it's a way of being. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally responds to others with compassion, kindness, and genuine care. He illustrated this in another powerful teaching, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Notice the phrase, as I have loved you. Jesus isn't asking people to love in some abstract way. He's saying, look at how I've loved you, and love others in that same way. How did Jesus love? He loved sacrificially, putting others' needs before his own comfort. He loved inclusively, reaching out to people that society had written off. He loved persistently, not giving up on people even when they disappointed him. He loved practically, meeting people's real needs, not just their spiritual ones. This kind of love requires an inner transformation. It requires becoming a person whose default response to others is compassion rather than judgment, generosity rather than selfishness, forgiveness rather than revenge. What's remarkable is how this teaching transformed the early Christian community. In a world divided by every imaginable barrier, these early followers of Jesus created something unprecedented. Communities where social, ethnic, and economic barriers were broken down by love. The Roman world had never seen anything like it. Here were communities where slaves and masters worshipped together, where Jews and Gentiles shared meals, where the wealthy sold their possessions to care for the poor, where women had dignity and respect, where children were valued and protected. The historian Rodney Stark has documented how this radical love actually changed the Roman Empire. When plague struck ancient cities, Christians were the ones who stayed to care for the sick while others fled. When babies were abandoned, a common practice in the Roman world, Christians rescued and raised them. When people were hungry, Christian communities fed them regardless of their background. This wasn't just charity, it was a complete reimagining of how human society could function. Instead of the strong dominating the weak, the powerful served the powerless. Instead of looking out only for your own group, you cared for anyone in need. The impact was so profound that within 3 centuries, this small movement of love had transformed the most powerful empire in the world. Now you might be thinking, that's all very inspiring, but what does this ancient teaching have to do with our modern world? The answer is, everything. We live in a time that's remarkably similar to Jesus' era in many ways. We're divided by politics, race, religion, and economics. Social media has created echo chambers where we only hear from people who agree with us. We've become experts at dehumanizing those who think differently than we do. Into this divided world, Jesus' teaching on love offers a radical alternative. What if, instead of demonizing people who disagree with us politically, we tried to understand their concerns and find common ground? What if, instead of ignoring the homeless person on the street, we saw them as our neighbor deserving of dignity and care? What if, instead of responding to hatred with more hatred, we had the courage to respond with love? This doesn't mean being naive or allowing people to walk all over you. Jesus himself confronted injustice and spoke truth to power. But he did it from a foundation of love rather than hatred, seeking restoration rather than destruction. Consider the civil rights movement in America. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. explicitly drew on Jesus' teaching about loving your enemies. They confronted systemic racism not with violence and hatred, but with love and nonviolent resistance. And it worked, not perfectly and not completely, but it changed laws, hearts, and ultimately society. But this teaching isn't just about changing society, it's about changing us as individuals. Jesus' command to love isn't just a nice suggestion for people who are naturally loving. It's a challenge for all of us, because let's be honest, love is hard. It's hard to love someone who has hurt you. It's hard to love someone whose views you find repugnant. It's hard to love when you're tired, stressed, or dealing with your own problems. It's hard to love consistently rather than just when you feel like it. But here's what Jesus understood. Love isn't primarily a feeling, it's a choice. It's a decision to seek the good of another person even when it's difficult, even when it costs you something, even when you don't feel like it. This means love is something you can grow in. You can become more loving through practice, through choosing love over and over again, through asking for help from God to love when your own strength fails. And here's the beautiful thing. When you choose love, something changes inside you. You become more peaceful, more joyful, more connected to others. Love transforms the lover as much as it transforms the loved. Of course, Jesus didn't just teach about love, he embodied it perfectly. The cross, Christians believe, is the ultimate demonstration of this love, God loving humanity so much that he was willing to suffer and die to reconcile us to himself and to each other. Whether or not you accept the religious claims about Jesus, there's something undeniably powerful about someone who lived and died consistently demonstrating the very love he taught. He loved the religious outcasts, the social rejects, the political enemies, and even those who killed him. This is why his teaching on love carries such authority. It's not just a good idea from a wise teacher, it's the lived experience of someone who proved that this kind of love is actually possible, even in the most extreme circumstances. So we return to our original question. What was Jesus' most important teaching? It was this revolutionary understanding of love. Love that breaks down barriers, love that extends to enemies, love that transforms individuals and communities, love that has the power to change the world. This teaching continues to challenge us today. In our polarized world, in our divided communities, in our own hearts where we struggle with prejudice, selfishness, and hatred, Jesus' words still ring out, love God with everything you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. The question isn't whether this teaching is true or beautiful. Most people, regardless of their religious beliefs, would agree that a world where people truly loved one another would be a better world. The question is whether we'll have the courage to put it into practice. Whether we'll love the difficult people in our lives. Whether we'll see strangers as neighbors deserving of care. Whether we'll choose forgiveness over revenge, compassion over judgment, inclusion over division. Because if we will, we become part of the continuing revolution that Jesus started 2,000 years ago. The revolution of love that has the power to transform not just individuals, but entire societies. And in a world that often seems overwhelmed by hatred, division, and despair, maybe that's exactly the revolution we need. The teaching is simple. The challenge is profound. The potential impact is unlimited. The question is, will you join the revolution? Thank you for watching. If this message resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. And remember, love isn't just an ideal to admire, it's a way of life to practice. Start today, start small, but start somewhere.